Welcome to another West Valley Mayoral Forum sponsored by the Arizona Republic. I'm Michael Ryan, Vice President and General Manager for the Community Republics, including those in Peoria, Glendale, Surprise, the Northwest Valley, and the Southwest Valley. My guests are three West Valley mayors. They are Michael LaVault from Youngtown, Tom Schoaf from Litchfield Park, and Bob Barrett, our host from Peoria. During the next hour, we'll talk about issues affecting their communities and also the West Valley at large. So let's begin, and we'll start with you, Mayor Barrett. What's the state of the economy in Peoria like these days?
The state of the economy in Peoria today is better than it has been. We survived the downturn probably better than most other cities. We haven't laid anybody off. We didn't increase any fees. We didn't have anybody furloughed. But what we're seeing now is a gradual increase in sales tax returns. Sales tax returns obviously being the lifeblood for most cities. On top of that, we just got Maxwell Industries to come in. And the key to that high-tech firm is not so much the 100 or 200 jobs they're bringing with them, but it puts us on the map in terms of being able to work with GPEC, the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, in terms of attracting other corporations to come out here. If it's good enough for Maxwell Technologies, then others will come and at least look.
Well, okay, very good. How about you, Mayor Schoaf?
The city of Litchfield Park has actually fared the economic downturn pretty well. We are unusual in that we're similar to Youngtown. We're a very small city, and so it's quite different than it is in Peoria. We do not have a lot of retailers, so we didn't suffer a tremendous drop in our city sales tax receipts. But we did see a significant drop in the state shared portion of the revenue that comes from retail sales. Overall, our budget, we're seeing increases now in the state shared revenues, and we're seeing some increases from our local businesses. So we've made it through at least this portion of the economic downturn, and we'll be fine so long as things don't get worse from here.
Mayor LaVault, I know it's been a tough situation for you in Youngtown, having had to eliminate your police force and to use the sheriff's office to provide public safety concerns. How are you dealing with your economic condition in Youngtown?
Well, Youngtown is also a small community, about 6,300 people, and we're in a great location in the Northwest Valley. We're right down the street from the new Cardinal Stadium, and you know, I tell my residents it's great to be within a short 10-minute drive of world-class entertainment, sports, restaurants, and that sort of thing, and then be able to come home to your small community at night. But we're struggling. In many ways, we're a microcosm of Maricopa County. I'm concerned about the number of vacant homes that still exist in my community, and again, a snapshot of the county, we're talking, I think, still somewhere around 200,000 vacant homes in Maricopa County. Sometimes when you're a small community, you have to take more drastic action more quickly than some of the larger cities. We don't have the same kinds of flexibilities in terms of revenue sources, but I think if we can right this economy, I think we'll be fine. You
mentioned about housing, and that, of course, has been a big issue in the West Valley because if you go back 5-6 years, people were talking about a housing boom, and that the West Valley was going to grow so exponentially. It had, the economy coming, it really slowed things down. How do you see the housing recovering, and when do you think it would actually recover?
Well, we've seen some indications of recovery. If you're familiar with Vistanza on the Trilogy side, which is the retiree side of Vistanza, has never stopped. I mean, they've been building even throughout this downturn. I mean, when the housing industry essentially went splat and everything stopped, they continued at a much reduced rate, but they've never stopped. We've had 2 or 3 other groups come through now and get zoning put on the properties with the intention of, in a year or two, actually beginning to build houses. I personally think that's a little bit too optimistic, but we'll see.
Litchfield Park pretty well built out, so how are you seeing the housing situation there?
We actually still have a subdivision, major subdivision, that's in the process of building out. So we're still seeing activity. We saw activity really throughout the entire economic downturn with some home building that continued in that subdivision area. I'm also hearing from engineers that more companies are starting to do the preliminary engineering work for subdivisions. And we hear from Luke Air Force Base that there are a number of developers that are starting to contact Luke again about developments within the Luke airspace. So there's much more activity than there has been in the last several years. That is, I think, the precursor to seeing more economic growth with new developments.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we know that is so important when you talk about housing is the jobs, and you mentioned about Maxwell and stuff. Where do you see the West Valley in growing as far as attracting more business?
I'm going to be the optimist in the group, I guess. I think the next boom is in the West Valley. When you're looking to locate a business, you look for several things. You look for a transportation corridor. We have that with the 101 and the 303. You look for relatively inexpensive land, which we have in the West Valley as opposed to the East Valley. You look for the quality of life, and I put the quality of life in the West Valley from all our communities up against anything in the East Valley. And finally, you look at education, and I can only speak toward PUSD, Peoria Unified, is one of the best school districts around. So I think the next boom is going to be on our side of the valley as opposed to the Southeast Valley.
Okay. Mayor Schiff?
I would absolutely agree with that. It's critical to us that we get 303 completed, but as that completes, that's a very important transportation corridor, and it's going to drive a significant amount of development. We're going to continue to see businesses move into this area. I actually took a short survey or small survey with some of the cities around us, and there are a significant number of new businesses that have opened in all of our communities, including Goodyear and Tolleson and Peoria. I mean, everyone has got a significant list of new businesses that have happened, and I think that's going to continue, and we're going to see that accelerate in the future. And as we produce the jobs, then we're going to produce the growth through the sale of our homes that are, that existing home stock we have. So I think it's a very important, it's an exciting time for us.
Okay. Mayor LaValle?
Yeah, I'm optimistic about the West Valley. I think clearly the capacity is there for tremendous growth. We have lots and lots of potential. What I'm most concerned about, frankly, are things that are part of the macro economy, I guess, things that are going to happen at the federal and state level, things over which we as mayors have little control, yet will impact our communities in a great way. Again, I think we have the capacity. I think it remains to be seen whether as a nation or state we have the will to make the hard decisions to lead our way out of this economic mess. But I'm optimistic. I know when you look at what's happening with the state, you look down the road and there are some challenges coming. Prop 100 sunsets in a couple of years. The Medicaid formula is going to be recalculated by the feds, and those two items alone represent about I think about a $1.2 billion bump in the road. So I'm optimistic, but I think we have to be realistic, and most importantly, we have to figure out a way to continue to enhance our cooperation with each other in the West Valley. I think that's key. We can control what we do, and if we make sure we cooperate so that we're ready when we turn the corner economically, I think we'll be fine.
All right, you touch on a lot of great topics. Go ahead. Sure.
The other thing too is that Westmark, which is the coalition of businesses and cities in the West Valley, is revamping itself with changing its emphasis onto becoming somewhat of a West Valley GPEC, which is a business attractor, and job creation is becoming their primary goal is what they're doing, and I think that'll help. That'll help all of us.
Mm-hmm. You talk because, and I want to get back to the regional cooperation, but I want to touch on a point that you had made too about some of your concerns from a federal and state level. And you mentioned about the potential sales tax, and quite honestly, the 1 cent sales tax, we're about halfway through it because, and it was pitched to the voters as temporary, but now I think people are saying, well, gee, do we need to extend it and stuff? But so, what are your other concerns that you see from the federal level or from the state level that could impact your communities?
Yeah, that's a huge question. We probably
and we've got time for it. And we got time.
Do we have enough time?
Yes.
We're leading. We're as a country going into a time of a new federal election, and we already have a lack of leadership at the federal level, and the federal election is just going to make that worse. The likelihood of any real activity that's going to improve our situation on the deficit is almost zero for the next year or more. So it's a very frightening time if you look at the potential financial implications for our country, and all of our economic situations in all of our cities and towns ultimately comes down to whether our federal government can somehow get control of its budget. And so it's very much a scary time. And then you couple with that the elimination of the sales tax, the temporary sales tax here in the state, and that's going to be another huge financial challenge for the state legislators. And they already have exhibited a willingness to sweep money from a variety of sources that were not intended for state general fund expenditures, including our city budgets and our county budgets. So they tend to make all of us weaker when they do that. So there are some great concerns from both the state and the federal level for all of us as mayors.
I agree, especially with the legislature in terms of they want to step forward and say, well, we balanced the budget. Yeah, they balanced the budget, but they transferred the budget for the Department of Water Resources onto all the cities. I mean, Phoenix paid, I think, more than $1 million or something like that. I don't remember what their share was. But all of a sudden, everybody gets a bill, and it's not even a fair system because someone like a Buckeye who has no water department and served by private companies must also pay that bill just as if they did.
Yeah, we're in that boat.
Oh, you're in that boat too, yeah.
Sure,
I mean, yeah, you too. I mean,
So it's a bill that they hand you and say,
absolutely. So it's easy for them to do that and to sweep the money. And, so you get down to a situation where if they continue this, where cities are just going to have one of two courses. Either we sit back and allow them to transfer all their debt onto us and continue to eat it, or else we'd say that's enough and sue them.
yeah.
How likely it would be to sue them?
I would want to sue them.
Oh, you would?
Absolutely.
Then,
Absolutely.
And which issues would you go after them?
Well, if they want to continue to do this kind of thing, I think we should sue them without a doubt. Without a doubt. There's no doubt about that at all.
What would you think the likelihood of winning a suit would be?
It'd be fair to Midland. I mean, we've done we threatened this suit before. I don't remember what it was at the league. We're both on the executive committee.
We've filed suit in the past.
Yeah.
And it's a very difficult issue because there are certain principles on how state revenue is divided amongst the state legislature and the cities and towns that have been pushed to the limit by the legislature. A good example is HERF. HERF money is supposed to come to the cities so that we can maintain our roads. But instead, a very large portion of our HERF revenue is now taken by the state and used for state general fund expenditures. So those are the kinds of things that we need to work with the legislature to try to eliminate in the future, because we can't continue to maintain our cities and towns without the funds that are part of our budgets that come through state shared revenues.
When you talk with your West Valley legislators, what are some of the issues you're bringing up, and what's their response when you talk to them?
Yeah, you bet. Well, a couple of us, maybe all three of us, went and actually lobbied on some pending legislation in the last session, and I have to tell you, frankly, I'm dismayed at some of the response that we got when I'm a conservative. I operate my small town from a set of conservative principles, and when I sat down with some of the Republican leadership and the legislature and told them that, look, you're doing to us what you're complaining the federal government is doing to the state of Arizona, why are you preempting the local jurisdiction? Why don't you let the local, there's a lot of talent at the local level. We deliver probably 2/3 of the service in this state. The things that touch people every day, I call them the bread and butter services, like police and fire and roads and parks and libraries. Why doesn't the legislature reach out and try and partner with us instead of continuing to be adversarial? I just think, we better get our house in order as a state so that when this economy starts to turn, we're ready to take advantage of that. We have a long way to go from economic development standpoint, I think.
Okay.
I think part of it is I'm not sure that most of the legislators have never served on city councils, and I'm not sure they really understand what's involved in terms of running a city any more than I understand what's involved in running a state. I mean, I'm not necessarily throwing rocks here, and I think it would be good for them to try to get to the cities more often and spend a little time and watch what we do and how we do what we do. I mean, by far, the cities have better managed the economic downturn than the state has. Absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that. The cities have made the cuts they've needed to make and made the changes they've needed to make. And the legislature could learn some lessons from that, rather than just decide that they're going to preempt our funding. But I mean, there will come a time. I mean, if they go after state shared revenues, as far as I'm concerned, we'd have to sue them. We'd have to sue them to prevent that. It's roughly a third of your budget.
Would you guys support suing the state if that came to pass?
If that's what it came down to, I think I certainly would.
Mayor Schoaf?
In the right circumstance, actually, I think both Bob and I have voted for that in the right circumstance on the through the executive committee of the league already.
Yeah.
If it came to that, then yes. Hopefully, we can find a path that doesn't take us down that road. Right. But it's at some point you have to say no. We can't do any more of this.
Mayor Schoaf, how responsive have you found the West Valley legislators when you want to talk to them about issues, or as they gear up for another session? Do they really seek you out to find out what some of your issues are?
It varies depending upon the particular legislator. There are some that are very responsive. There are some that spend a lot of time actually communicating with us to make sure that we understand what their priorities are, and they try to find out if there are things that they need to do to help us. There are others that are much less so that in terms of being open and supportive. So
want to name names?
Individual. No, I don't think that's going to lead to any positive results.
It was interesting.
Make for a more interesting show, that's for sure.
It was interesting. We recently had a West Valley mayors and managers meeting, and was hosted by City of Surprise, and all of the legislators in the would be three I think legislative districts, LD 9, 12, and 4, were invited, and most of them attended, and it was a bit of there was a lot of back and forth, and not really rough and tumble, but just a lot of I think pretty fruitful discussions, and that's the kind of thing that ought to be happening on a regular basis. We shouldn't have to get to the point where we have to decide whether or not we're going to support a lawsuit to make our legislature do what they ought to be partnering with us to do in the first place. I think we need to figure out a way to keep those lines of communication open.
Recently, I met with the East Valley mayors, and they were, when I asked what they were looking for from the legislature, they said, just leave us alone. It was like, they won't, yeah, exactly. It was almost like, hey, don't even go into session, we're okay. Is there certain things you're looking for from the legislature this time around?
I think this is one of the best answers I've ever heard from East Valley.
Yeah,
that is a good answer.
I definitely have to agree with them.
It's a sign of regional cooperation. We're going to join with East Valley and just say, please leave us all alone.
Let's talk about regional cooperation, and you mentioned it, Mayor LaValle. I mean, the interesting thing here in the West Valley is there's so many different communities of different sizes. I mean, when you go to the East Valley, there, the 4 major cities, and Gilbert being a town, encompass 1 million people. In the West Valley, you have cities the size of Glendale and Peoria. You also have cities the size of Litchfield Park and Youngtown. How is it important for you folks to work together and kind of try to speak with one voice in protecting the interest in seeking more development in the West Valley?
I think it's critical. I mean, it's absolutely critical. If you look at, for example, the Prop 400 money, sales tax for freeways. The East Valley has always gotten pretty much what it wanted first, and we've been second. And I think it's because as a group, they seem to cooperate better than we do. I think that's changing. I think we're getting better at it. But for many years, I think there was a lack of cooperation.
It's interesting. The entire West Valley is a bedroom community, if you will. I mean, it's amazing. Everybody gets up in the morning and drives east to go to work, and at night they drive west to go back home.
And they drive in the sun both times. I always thought being in it, it's a tough deal.
But here's the thing: if the city of Peoria can attract an employer that will bring 500 new jobs to the West Valley, I'm going to stand up and cheer. It doesn't have to be Youngtown. I mean, we don't have the footprint to accommodate those kinds of things anyway. And as I tell my residents, every good thing that happens in the West Valley benefits us because we're right there in the middle of it. And I think if we can get to that point where we all recognize that that's true, you know, we can instead of and you know, don't get me wrong, there's always going to be a healthy competition between communities for amenities, but at the end of the day, whether it's located in Peoria or Litchfield Park or Glendale, it doesn't really matter. It impacts all the residents in the West Valley.
Okay.
I absolutely agree that regional cooperation is critical, and it's critical across our west side region, and it's also critical across our valley. Mm-hmm. And I think in both instances there have been tremendous improvements in that cooperation over the last 4 or 5 years. On the west side, all of the mayors are spending a lot more time to get to know each other and developing better relationships so that we can understand what's important to each of the cities from their perspective, and how can we work together to try to make the situation best for the west side. And there's a lot of reaching across the west side, east side, you know, chasm, if you'll call it, and there's been a lot of time spent between east side mayors and west side mayors to get to know each other better and to try to understand, you know, how can we make the valley better. And you see it in a number of different institutions that there have been significant changes in the way that things are approached. You don't see the kinds of regional fights that we saw several years ago on some of these issues.
Give our viewers an example of what you're talking about.
An easy example is the Mesa Gateway Airport. That's an asset that really helps the entire valley. That airport, and particularly in terms of Allegiant Air, provides travel options that you don't have at Sky Harbor, and it's travel options for all of us. It's travel options for the west side also. My mother actually used that airline to come down from Oregon, and it was very convenient. But there was a real big problem with getting off of the freeway to get into that airport. It's a huge problem. And so MAG came together as an entire group, and I think unanimously agreed to move that project forward in our transportation improvement plan and to provide some ways to do some alternative financing on it so that it was possible actually to get started on that off-ramp more quickly, because it was something that was important for the success of that airport. 4 or 5 years ago, that might have been a big fight, and when it was done a year ago, it was not a fight at all. We all sat down and we understood the importance of that asset to the valley, and so there was no dispute over it. So I think that's the difference. The kinds of things that we're seeing are not, that used to be huge contentious issues are just not so much anymore.
Okay.
And maybe it's a maturation. I don't know. I mean, all cities act in their own best interest. Don't hesitate to understand that. But by the same token, I think, as Tom says, we all realize that, okay, it's an airport in Mesa, who cares? Well, we do care because it makes a difference. It makes a difference to the valley.
Yeah.
I mean, if it helps them, as it's been said here, it's going to help all of us.
And conversely, it was interesting because I know when getting conversations with Mayor Scott Smith of Mesa, who thinks it's hugely important for the viability of Luke Air Force Base, because they in the East Valley know about it because of the closure of Williams. But I mean, they realize that, hey, keeping Luke Air Force Base vibrant not only helps the West Valley, it helps the area as a total.
Mm-hmm.
You bet.
Talk about, Mayor Schoaf, about your work with the Brookings Institute, and I know that I think our viewers would be interested in that.
Well, MAG is the region-wide association of governments. All of the cities and towns in the county are members of MAG, and we have representation on it. The mayors all participate in the regional council of MAG. And one of the things that MAG does is to plan transportation infrastructure, significant transportation infrastructure for the entire region. We plan all the freeways, all the rail systems, all the major arterials. All of that planning goes through MAG. And one of the things that we realized at MAG is that in doing that planning, we have not spent enough time on understanding the impact of transportation infrastructure on economic development. And we have a responsibility when we plan out our transportation infrastructure, that we do it in a way that supports sustainable economic development in our region. So we developed the Economic Development Committee at MAG to do that function, to spend time on looking at economic development and how it's impacted by infrastructure. That committee brought together a variety of interests, both from the cities and towns, also brought in representatives from the state in the form of the Commerce Authority, brought in GPAC, brought in JPAC, brought in all the different economic development entities that are important in the region. All have come together as part of this EDC at MAG. Brookings Institute was looking for a partner to do a metropolitan business plan, which is the concept of it is to take business planning as it's done in large corporations with the same sorts of intellectual criteria that tries to drive a fair and balanced process to do business planning, and to try to apply that at the municipal level and do that for a region. And they chose MAG to partner with through MAG's Economic Development Committee to do a study, to do a business plan for our region. And so we have just kicked that off. We're in the first few months of that process, and its goal is twofold. We hope to be able to identify a key initiative that the region can work on that will help economic development in the region long term. And we also hope that we will develop a set of processes and a set of relationships amongst the different players in the economic development arena, so that we can work together in the future to do more initiatives in the future. We think it can be a game changer for the way economic development is driven across our region, and make us more competitive globally, and in the end drive cooperation across the region, so that we all benefit from a stronger team.
Who came together from the region to really kind of spearhead? Who's really kind of helping spearhead the effort?
Well, there's a huge number of individuals, and I hesitate to name any names because I'm going to leave somebody out.
Sure.
But the major players that we've had involved is Mayor Hallman from Tempe, who's the current chair of MAG, and Mayor Smith from Mesa. Mayor Smith actually is the mayor that has been closest with Brookings and has been our liaison with Brookings. So they've been important players in this project. Mm-hmm. Mayor Scruggs and Mayor Barrett have been important in the process. If you go outside of the political arena, it's been very important for the support that we've had from GPAC, and Barry Broom has been very supportive of the process, and has been GPAC staff along with the MAG staff are the two entities. GPAC and MAG are really the two entities that are providing the staff support that is necessary to perform this kind of in-depth planning. So both of those entities have been very important. We've gotten support from the Arizona Commerce Authority, so the state has been supportive of the process. And interestingly enough, we've also, for the very first time, we've brought together support from Arizona State University, Thunderbird School of Global Management, and the Maricopa County Community College District. So the three major educational players in the valley are also been very supportive and have been active participants in the process. So we have a very wide range of groups and a wide range of personalities involved in it.
Yeah, Mayor Barrett, what's your take on this initiative?
Oh, I agree with Tom, and one thing Tom has done, he's left himself out. He's been one of the key drivers in this effort. Again, this goes back to the regional cooperation and the maturation of all the cities. You know, we are, 10 years ago, when I first started in politics, there's no way you would have MAG looking at a regional effort, because MAG itself wasn't that strong and that unified in order to reach out to other organizations like GPAC and the ASU and U of A and the rest of them. But if you look at what's happening over time, I think everybody's slowly but surely beginning to realize that, you know, we all got to hang together, because we'll hang separately if we don't. And that's definitely what's going on. And I can't help but think maybe the downturn made a big difference here. Everybody got hit hard. And I think that helps us understand that we can't depend on the housing industry as the sole driver for the economy in the Valley of the Sun. And I think what's come out of that is the regional cooperation that you're seeing.
Mayor Laveau?
Well, I think the comment that you just made, well, the two things you just said that are interesting. Maybe the downturn had an impact. It's funny how when you're in an absolute panic, you tend to do the right things, kind of things more quickly. But what you said about housing, I think that's critical here. If we allow ourselves to go right back to the boom and bust cycle of housing being the Johnny One Note, if you will, of the Arizona economy, I think that's not going to sustain us as a state long term. I think the Brookings project is exactly the kind of thing that we need to see happening going forward. I'd like to see the state doing some things in terms of tinkering a little more with their tax policy. And giving us some of the building blocks of economic development, like tax increment finance districts. I think we have to get to the point as a state where we're doing those kinds of things to give us the tools. But clearly, this is the sort of thing that we have to be doing going forward.
Any clue yet, or any inkling on what the initiative would be, the regional initiative?
I have no inkling at this point. There are some things that clearly come to mind as being potentials. One that's been discussed a lot is the whole aerospace industry, and we call them clusters now. So we have clusters of businesses that are involved in aerospace, and that's an important part of our economy. But the problem with a lot of these clusters is when you look at them, it's hard to predict now what is aerospace going to look like in the next 5 years. The economic headwinds that are out there in terms of the financial budgets at the federal level are certainly going to impact defense spending, and it may very well impact that whole aerospace industry. So how important that's going to be to us as a region as we go forward is, until we go through and actually do the study, we won't know. Mm-hmm. And so the key thing at this point is that we want to make sure that the study is done in a way that fairly looks at all of the different strengths and weaknesses of the region and tries to find that initiative that is going to be the best for us. You know, not the best yesterday, but the best in the next several years.
And when do you figure the study will be done?
We hope in the next year.
Within
the next year.
All right, stay tuned on that. Let's talk about transportation, though. It's a big issue in the West Valley. I mean, I-10 is pretty much completed now. The 303, they're pretty much completed as well. What are some of the major transportation issues you see going forward? I know that's a topic at the Republic that we've been expending a lot of time of talking about, because in 2012 we plan to do more coverage of it. So what do you see, Mayor Barrett, we'll start with you, and some of the major transportation needs for the West Valley going forward?
That's a pretty good question. And for us at Peoria, we're starting to look at rail. We're not talking about the light rail that's running around Phoenix. You know, we'll probably all die of old age before it gets to Peoria. But we're looking at commuter rail and possibly high-speed rail, and those studies are ongoing. We formed a coalition of cities here in the West Valley, Northwest Valley, to take a look at it. You know, can we take Grand Avenue and make that a commuter rail line? You know, and if we can do that, what would it take? What would it cost? I mean, one of the first things I learned getting into politics is if it's not in the budget, it doesn't exist. This doesn't exist because it's not in anybody's budget. But what we're trying to do is bring this forward as something that is a strong possibility. I know some people are saying, well, you know, that's too far in the future, but I always go back to, I'm going to pick on the Republic because I used to work there. I'm going to pick on the Republic a little bit. You know, back in the 60s, Pulliam decided that we didn't need any freeways. And his attitude was, if you don't build it, they won't come. Well, that didn't quite work. But by shutting that out and shutting out the idea of freeways, he crippled the valley. I mean, look, we're still trying to catch up in terms of freeways. And my attitude toward the commuter rail and high-speed rail possibilities falls along the same lines. We can ignore it right now if we want to, but if we do that, are we going to cripple ourselves sometime in the future? Why not start taking a very hard, very serious look at this? And I know that they're talking about the high-speed rail between Tucson and Phoenix. In my job at CAP, I used to go down to Tucson all the time. I don't think it's viable. And the reason it's not viable is because it's only one piece of the puzzle. I could take a train down to Tucson and it would dump me in the downtown area, but that's not where I need to be. And make it easier for people to understand, turn it around. If you're coming up from Tucson and you have a meeting at 24th and Camelback and they dump you at 2nd Street in Jackson and it's August, what are you going to do? You know, you have to have the second piece of that. And the second piece of that would be something like these little smart cars. Maybe your ticket gives you the use of a smart car for so many hours. And you come up, you get in the smart car, you go to your meeting, come back, you take the train back. That would work. But by only looking at the train piece of it, it isn't going to work. It's a multimodal kind of a thing, is the happy phrase we all use for that.
Okay, what about commuter rail?
I think commuter rail is a difficult proposition without a change in the way we look at our transportation system planning. We are still at an infancy stage of multimodal concepts. We do not do well at marrying any of the individual concepts in the region. You know, we have a light rail system, and it's literally its own little system. We have a bus system, and the bus system doesn't even do well in relating to each of the different cities and towns systems, so that we really don't have a regional bus system. We have a regional freeway system, and you know, that's probably the only regional system that we have. Our arterials are somewhat regional, although we really don't plan our arterial movements as well as we could in terms of coordinating those efforts. So one of the things that is happening within the transportation area is an effort to try to bring all these different modes together and to try to look at this system as a system in which they each depend upon each other. There have been some changes in the way that we're trying to manage our transit system and our bus system and our rail system that hopefully will help us in that regard. So commuter rail, I think, is going to be a difficult proposition until we get that done. The thing that actually has a more, maybe a more immediate future is the freight rail system. There is a lot of work being done on looking at how we move freight in and out of the state of Arizona from Mexico, and how we do our customs, because we've seen significant changes in the way freight moves from Mexico. Not nearly as much freight moves, for example, in the area of produce into Arizona as it used to, and much more of it now goes through Texas. Texas is clearly taken a lot of market share away from Arizona as a way to move produce into the United States. And so there's a lot of work being done on how we get goods across the border, both in our ports of entry in Nogales and the ports of entry in the Yuma area at San Luis. And we're looking also at the issue of, once it comes in, how is that freight moved? And you have freight lines where we have the potential to move freight on things like the Welton line, but the Welton line is shut down. And so there are different strategies being discussed on how that line can be put back into service, how the cost of that could be covered, and those are all related more to freight discussions.
Okay. Mayor LaVault, what would you like to see from a transportation standpoint?
Well, you know, I think the notion of commuter rail along the Grand Avenue corridor, I think that's certainly a goal that we ought to be looking at, certainly long term. If we can get BNSF, the railroad company that owns the rail line along there, to work with the cities in that regard, it would be a great thing. I think the problem you have there right now is that you have essentially one set of tracks, and in some places that right of way is too narrow to actually run a parallel set of tracks, so you're going to have to share freight with passenger rail. If we get to the point where that inland port opens just west of Surprise, which would allow BNSF to close that freight yard downtown, that would open up that Grand Avenue corridor. So I think it's a realistic goal. The thing I think we have to keep in mind, though, going forward is something I talked about last night at my council meeting. I think that in a very real sense, what we're looking at now in terms of governments is the new normal. I think we're looking at a very limited bucket of resources going forward. So I think it's very important that we do the kind of strategic planning we've been talking about this morning, so that we make sure that we optimize the use of that limited resource stream. Okay.
What other, I mean, in the shorter term, because I mean, commuter rail is kind of a longer term play. Shorter term, what are some of the needs you see from, and you hear from residents that they want for the West Valley?
For the West Valley and the northern half, obviously, is the crossing of the river. We don't have very many east-west streets. I mean, you use Bell. If you've tried to use Bell, you understand what a horror story that is. And after that, you're pretty much out of luck. So to get from here to Surprise, during rush hour is not a pleasant experience.
Yeah,
it is a nightmare. I mean, so we need more crossings of the Agua. Now, where do we put them, and when do you put them there? Those are questions. For us, one of our problems is one of them is at Beardsley. We already have truck traffic on Beardsley, and Beardsley splits a community, a retirement community. So there's not going to be a crossing at Beardsley unless they take the trucks off.
I'll tell you a funny story. There's a QT actually we have two QTs that kind of bookend Youngtown, one on Olive to the south and one on Grand to the north. And I was in getting some coffee not too long ago during the morning rush hour, and things were jammed up on Grand, and I looked over and a Humvee came bumping up through the river.
Oh, wow.
And onto the QT parking lot and went around the log jam on Grand Avenue. So I think you're exactly right. We in our neck of the woods, we need more crossings at the river. We need more surface streets going east and west. Peoria Avenue.
Or more Humvees.
Yeah, or more Humvees. Yeah.
That would do it.
Yeah. Peoria Avenue, which actually terminates in Youngtown on the east side of the river, would be a good candidate for that to happen, if we can figure out how to make it work.
Okay.
Yeah, if I remember right, didn't Sun City come unglued when that was suggested?
Well, they don't want to lose that big wide green belt down the middle of Peoria Avenue. That's where they'd go to get the extra lanes,
Yeah. Well, you've got the Northern Parkway plans coming through. So, I mean, that'll give you another east-west corridor. But I don't think that's sufficient in and of itself. I mean, if you look at the growth that Surprise has had, you look at the growth Surprise is projecting, somehow or other, you got to bring those people across the river.
Yeah.
Riverbed, rather. It's not really a river. You can jump on the 303 and go around, but how many people will do that?
Yeah.
You need more crossings, and unfortunately, the geography of the northern part of Peoria is tough. You got mountains up there and things like that. So where are you going to put them? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mayor Schoaf?
If you look at the regional transportation plan, the TIP, in its current form, the East Valley has a lot more of their Proposition 400 money dedicated to improving their arterial streets and the flow of their traffic away from the freeways. Mm-hmm. On the west side, the money that is in the plan for the west side is much more dedicated to the building of freeways because we didn't have anything. And while like the 303, it is quote unquote in construction, it's still a long way from being done. But the unfortunate part is that we've taken about $4 billion out of our transportation plan, and so we have a number of roads on the west side that are simply not going to get built because there is not going to be money from Proposition 400 to build them that are important, particularly for the Southwest Valley. There are roads like 801 and some linkages between Highway 85 and 303 and I-10 that are just not in the budget anymore. So what that's going to bring up over the next several years, and really even maybe shorter than that, maybe the next year or so, is the need to start the conversation of how are we going to carry on after Proposition 400. And in the new plan, on the west side, what's going to need to be done is a lot more concentration on arterials. Mm-hmm. These roads that get us across rivers and that get us to some of the major transportation corridors we have. We're going to have to spend the time on the west side now to do what the east side has done, and that's improve our arterial roads.
Okay.
Yeah, because we're like one cycle behind the East Valley. I mean, they get the majority of the freeways. We didn't. Now they're finishing up some of their freeways, and we get the 101, and then in the next cycle you get the 303. But we've still got, as Tom says, and we've got a ways to go. And now they're dealing with their arterials. We haven't finished our freeways yet.
No, and the tough part too is that a lot of times when the East Valley roads were being built was when the economy was a little more flush with cash. Mm-hmm. Now the West Valley is trying to do that at a time when, as you say, the new normal may be what we're experiencing now. Any other thoughts on transportation? All right, we'll move on. In previous West Valley mayoral forums, we've done them in Glendale, and Elaine Scruggs has made an impassioned plea of why she was against the proposed casino. Mayor Barrett, this will give you your chance to explain why you think the casino would be a good value for the West Valley.
More regional cooperation.
Exactly.
Jobs. One word. That's it. Jobs. I've said this before. I've said this all along. I know some people don't like casinos for moral reasons. They're opposed to them for a variety of reasons. But to me, it's strictly about jobs. I mean, I know people today who are headed for foreclosure. I know people today who have kids and they can't buy their supplies for school. And I know people today that are struggling to put food on the table. We have the potential for 6,000 jobs now. Not someday jobs, not maybe jobs. And I think Glendale's being very optimistic to think after all of this that the Tohono would actually allow themselves to become part of Glendale. And that seems to be what they're counting on. That's one of their major complaints. But it's jobs now. So it's 6,000 construction jobs right now, not someday, not maybe, right now, today. I mean, if they got the green light today for whatever that would take, there's no doubt in my mind that before the end of the month, they'd be out there pushing dirt around.
The construction jobs, I understand some of the jobs in the casino, though, are they the type of jobs that really are going to benefit the West Valley because of the amount of pay that these people would probably get?
Well, I've thought about that too. It's very interesting. When Cabela's open and the line around jobbing.com arena went around the block, nobody was criticizing low-paid jobs. When Kohl's decided that they were going to add 1,000 or 2,000 to their workforce and the line went around the block, nobody was complaining about that. When McDonald's said that they were going to increase their workforce, nobody was complaining about the salaries there either. So what's the complaint about this one? If you're out of work, any work is worth it. I mean, it's that simple. You've probably never been out of work, but it's not a fun thing. It's very tough. So it's jobs now. It's 3,000 jobs, but it's not all in the casino. What you have to also take into consideration for this is whoever, and I've talked to Chairman Norris, whatever supplier company for the food that they contract with may end up having to hire more people because there's going to be a big demand for that. Same with all the beverages, same with laundries and everything else. I mean, there are a lot of subsidiary kinds of things that will create jobs that are not directly casino related, but because of the casino and the demands for those services that the casino creates, will create additional jobs. And they won't all live in Peoria. They won't all be Indians. But they'll live throughout the West Valley. Yeah.
Representative Trent Franks has been trying to push stuff through Congress to prevent that from happening. What's your take on Trent Franks' action?
I went back to D.C. and testified in Congress against it. Again, it's over jobs. There's a lot of other things you can talk about on this. At CAP, we deal with a lot of the Indian tribes. One of the concerns that I hear expressed is if Frank's bill is successful and they go back and successfully change agreements between the Tohono Nation and the United States, all the other tribes suddenly feel like they may be vulnerable to that too. So, no, they don't like it. Why does the GRIC, which is the Gila River Indian community, oppose it? It's because they don't want the competition. It's that simple. I don't know that, I've been told by people in Surprise that up to 20 buses a day take people to the East Valley, to the casino, to Fort McDowell, to the GRIC's casino and everything else. And if you build that casino, it's not going to be a boon. You're just shifting money around. Well, you're darn right I want to shift that money around. I want to take that entertainment dollar that's being spent in the East Valley and bring it back.
It's in the past, it seems like you've been kind of out there by yourself on this because I know Mayor Schoaf and Mayor Laval have been opposed to it. It seems like you might be picking up an ally in the new Surprise Mayor Sharon Wolcott, because when we had talked with her, she seemed more ambivalent, but did mention that a lot of people from Surprise would like to have a casino somewhere, and it would certainly be a lot closer if they went to the Tohono.
Well, that's true, and it's very popular in Sun City too. I talked to Debbie Lesko, who's in the House, and she has a neutral stance on this. And I said, why do you have a neutral stance? And she said, well, on the one hand, Glendale's opposed to it. I'm in favor of it, so Peoria's in favor of it. But the people in Sun City want it too, and her district extends across horizontally across that group. The opinion poll you guys are running is anything. I mean, obviously the public supports the idea of having this there.
Okay. Mayor Schoaf, your thoughts?
Well, I think this is a perfect demonstration of regional cooperation and how much we've grown up. Because 5 years ago we probably would have been at at odds over this and really been fighting, physically fighting over it. Now we can sit and we can have different opinions and talk about them rationally and try to understand each other. For me, it's a bad set of public policies that would allow this to happen. I don't think, from a number of different viewpoints, that having a business that is operating under a different set of rules dropped into an urban environment, a business that is not subject to zoning, not subject to the same taxation rules, isn't subject to the same labor relation rules, it's literally a separate nation. Dropping that into the middle of an urban environment is just not a good public policy decision. So I do not support it.
Okay, Mayor LaValle?
Well, I don't know how this is going to turn out, whether it will become a reality or not, but as I told you, kind of halfway jokingly out in the hallway, if it becomes a reality, there's going to be a subway built from Sun City at 111th Avenue directly to the casino.
Wow, we'll finally get mass transit.
It'll be a short line, though. I really, I have to echo a lot of what Mayor Schoaf said. I really oppose it from a public policy standpoint. I think, and look, I get the fact that people in Youngtown are as desperate for jobs as people in Peoria and people in Litchfield Park. I mean, that's a given, but I don't know. I think we have to be thoughtful as policymakers. Not everything that makes money is necessarily good public policy, and I'm really concerned about it from that standpoint.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure I get it, guys. And the reason I say this is they have their own set of rules. They can do their own regulations, but it's not going to go through and do anything that would be other than first class. I mean, you don't open up a casino on the cheap. You don't do that. I mean, you want to bring these folks in there. This is going to be a quality system. If you've seen their others down in Tucson, you understand what I'm talking about. Right. And so the idea of you're dropping some nation in the middle of the urban area, I'm sorry, I don't see where that makes any difference.
Okay.
Because they're going to work. They're not going to do anything that's going to harm their business, and their business is to get you to come there.
Do you? What do you think chances of success?
Well, you'd have to talk to the lawyers. Well, I can tell you right now, I mean, Glendale is 0 for, what, 4 or 5 in the courts. And I think this is going to be settled pretty much in the courts. Mm-hmm. Personally, I'd be really surprised if Frank's bill makes it through the Senate, unless they can attach it to a rider that's got to go through. I mean, it's a Democratic Senate. So I kind of have doubts about whether that's going to be an issue. So right now they're at the Ninth Circuit Court, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's in the Ninth Circuit Court.
Have you talked to McCain or Kyle's folks in the Senate about it?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, I support it. I'm not out there trying to get it through. That's their problem.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to go out there and do that.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's right. Ultimately, it's going to be settled in the courts, I believe. Yeah. But as Mayor Schoaf said, reasonable people get to have reasonable disagreements. But at the end of the day, we find enough commonality and synergy to come together and take care of the people's business.
Yeah. And I think it should be in the courts, which is one of the things that, on a personal basis, irritates me about Frank's bill. I mean, he's trying to jump the gun. Now, is he jumping the gun because Glendale thinks their court case is really weak? I mean, given their track record so far, I would assume that was part of it.
Yeah. Beginning of the new year, we'll have new leadership, and surprise, I alluded to it with Sharon Molcott taking over for Lynn Truitt. How do you see that change affecting West Valley cooperation or any other issues?
I don't think it'll affect West Valley cooperation. She's experienced in terms of politics. She worked in the Minnesota legislature, so she kind of gets give and take in cooperation. That's a lot of that will just depend on her relationship with her council, I think, and I have no way to prejudge that.
Okay, Mayor Schoaf.
I don't think it's going to hurt West Side cooperation. We spend a lot of time now as a mayors, as a group, trying to make sure that we know each other and we understand each other's concerns and positions on different things, and we try to find ways to strike a balance and that will bring harmony amongst the region, and I think that will continue. I don't see her having a negative impact on that. I think she'll join the rest of the West Side and be a part of that group discussion and process that will lead the West Side forward in much the same way as it would have been led forward if it was Mayor Truitt.
Mayor LeBeau?
Yeah, I have to echo that. I know Sharon. She's bright. I think she'll do the best job she can for her community and for the West Valley. And as I said earlier, there are a few issues that we're always going to have some tension about and a little bit of disagreement. But you know, when you look at our interests that we have in common, probably 9 times out of 10, we're all going to be working the same side of the street. And that's what we have to look toward, is you know, continuing to work together.
Okay. In our final minutes, let's talk about, as we look to 2012, and we've talked about a lot of issues, are there other issues you're concerned about for your community as you move forward? And we'll start with you, Mayor Barrett.
Job creation. I mean, that's the driving force. And I think that is the #1 priority set by the Peoria City Council, is economic development. And I think that's the driver. You get the jobs, you're going to increase your tax base, you know, you're going to provide jobs for your folks, they don't have to leave. And that's the key. And I'm really glad to see that while we say that's #1, Westmark has switched over to making that their priority. We've got the Brookings Institute study coming up. I think the whole valley has realized that that's what we have to do. Mm-hmm. We can't just sit around and just endlessly build houses.
Mm-hmm. Mayor Shove?
2012 is all about sustainable economic development.
Mm-hmm.
It's building good quality jobs so that we have individuals who can participate in our economy, who can buy our homes, and whose kids will attend our schools. It's all about sustainable economic development.
Okay, Mayor LeBeau?
Mayor Barrett, your comment about that we can't sit here and just keep building houses, we tried that and we know it doesn't work, right? Ultimately, the pyramid collapses.
Well, sooner or later we'll recover, but then again, somewhere down the road we'll fall again.
Right. No, I would say this, Youngtown, we're a small landlocked community. Nothing wrong with living in a small town. Although I grew up on the south side of Chicago, I spent my entire adult life in small towns. I love small town living. I think some of the decisions and choices that we made in Youngtown will make our community vital and sustainable going forward. What we did last night with policing was just an example of that. We have figured out how to do more with less, and sometimes something with nothing. And I think that's probably a pretty good model for government in general.
Yeah. Final thoughts from you, gentlemen?
I'm upbeat about it. I'm optimistic about it. I think the future of the West Valley is great. Yeah, I'm term limited, so I won't see the boom. But I think the boom is 3 to 4 years from now. Mm-hmm. I really do.
One of the things that you'll find if you hang out with a bunch of mayors is that mayors are all optimistic. You know, if we weren't optimistic, we wouldn't do this. We wouldn't do this crazy job.
Couldn't stand it, right?
No. We all see a silver lining, and we all think that as the next day dawns, it's going to be better than the day we're in. Mm-hmm. But even given that, I think all of us agree that the West Side really is the place to be in the Valley at the moment. We do have a tremendous number of assets. We have great people out here working together to try to make it a better place to be. And I think it's going to do well. We're going to have a very vibrant economy developing again on the West Side, and it's going to be an exciting place to be.
Mayor LeBeau?
Well, you know, I would again repeat some of the things I said last night. I think governance it comes down to a series of choices. As I said last night, we can provide whatever level of service the taxpayer is willing to pay for. And I think as leaders, we have to be, optimistic and upbeat, but we have to be wise in terms of the kinds of policy decisions that we make. I've noticed there's an inverse relationship between good politics and good policy. Typically, if you're making a decision for political reasons, it's probably not very good public policy. But that's an inherent flaw in our system, and this is still the greatest country and government on the face of the earth. So,
all right, we'll leave it at that. There was a very good discussion. We talked about a lot of different things. We found out that the cities may be mad enough to actually want to sue the state legislature, so that'd be interesting. And you explained why the casino would be good for the West Valley and a whole lot more. So I really appreciate your time. I want to appreciate and thank the great folks here at Peoria City Cable 11. They did a fantastic job in putting this all together. So with that, I will close and thank again the three mayors who participated, Michael Laval from Youngtown, Tom Show from Litchfield Park, and our host, Bob Barrett from Peoria. I'm Michael Ryan, Vice President and General Manager of the Arizona Republic, and thank you for joining us on this most recent, I can get it out, I'll get it out, I got time, most recent West Valley Mayoral Forum. Thanks.